Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This week we're going to do a bit of a crypto news roundup, looking at kind of a bunch of different stories from the past week. Should be fun, should be interesting. A lot going on, as always, in crypto land.
Yeah, definitely. It's a never a dull moment.
So to kick things off, I thought we could start with Bitcoin. It seems like things are looking pretty bright for Bitcoin right now, closing out the week on a high note.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely had a good week, and a lot of traders feeling kind of bullish about its potential for some price increases. There's a lot of buzz about the golden cross, where the 50-day moving average crossed above the 200-day moving average. Historically, that's been seen as a pretty bullish indicator, but it's important to, look at that in context.
So should we all be stocking up on champagne just yet? Or is there more to the story than just that?
Yeah, well, while the golden cross is definitely, generating some excitement, it's important to remember that historical patterns aren't always foolproof predictors, especially with major events like, we got the U.S. presidential election coming up and the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision. Both of those have the potential to really shake things up.
Right. So a healthy dose of caution is always a good idea in the crypto world. And you mentioned something before we started recording about a CME futures gap. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit and tell us what that means?
Sure, yeah. So there's this gap around $67,000, and it basically represents a price range where Bitcoin futures contracts haven't been traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And, these gaps, they tend to get filled eventually. So it means that Bitcoin could dip down to that level at some point.
Okay, interesting. So a potential dip, but also a potential buying opportunity if you're looking to get in or add to your stack. Now, before we completely move on from Bitcoin, I wanted to touch on Metaplanet. This is a Japanese firm that's been aggressively stacking sats.
Yeah, Asia's MicroStrategy, as some people are calling them. They just recently actually passed a pretty major milestone, accumulating over 1,000 Bitcoin in their holdings, worth about $69 million right now.
Wow, they're not messing around. But what's the strategy behind this? Are they just following MicroStrategy's lead, or is there something more to it?
Well, I think one of the things that sets Metaplanet apart is that they're really focusing on what they're calling BTC yield. And this is a metric that basically helps them assess whether their Bitcoin purchases are actually translating into tangible value for their shareholders.
So it's not just about holding Bitcoin, it's about making sure that it's actually contributing to the overall health of the company.
Exactly. It shows that they're thinking strategically about their Bitcoin investments, and they're really prioritizing their shareholder value.
Really interesting. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another major player in the crypto world that's been making headlines, and that's Tether, and specifically their stablecoin USDT.
Yeah, they always seem to be in the news one way or another.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
Right, and this past week was no exception. There was that report from the Wall Street Journal alleging that there's a U.S. government investigation into Tether for potential violations.
Not great press. But I thought they denied those allegations.
Yeah. They definitely came out swinging. Tether's CEO, Paolo Ardoino, very strongly denied any wrongdoing. And he actually provided a really detailed breakdown of Tether's reserves at the Plan B Lugano event.
Right, and from what I saw, those reserves are pretty impressive. They got $100 billion in U.S. treasuries, 82,000 Bitcoin, and 48 tons of gold.
Yeah, it's a lot of backing there. But it's definitely raising some questions about the future of stablecoins, especially with all this regulatory scrutiny.
Especially with the EU's MiCA regulations coming into play as well, which have their own set of requirements.
Right, and Ardoino has actually been pretty vocal about some of his concerns with those regulations, particularly the requirement for stablecoin issuers to hold 60% of their reserve assets in European banks. He's argued that could create some systemic risks, especially given all the instability we've seen in the traditional banking sector lately.
Right, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and how that affected Circle's USDC stablecoin.
Exactly.
Okay, so a lot to think about there. Definitely a very complex situation with valid arguments on both sides. But let's move across the pond for a second and actually talk about those MiCA regulations in a little more detail.
Yeah, MiCA stands for Markets in Crypto Assets, and it's a pretty big deal. It's going to be a real game changer for the European crypto landscape.
Yeah, it's basically an attempt to create a unified regulatory framework for crypto assets across the entire EU, which is pretty ambitious when you think about it.
Yeah. It's a big undertaking, and it's definitely got its critics. Some people are saying this is going to stifle innovation, but others are saying it's absolutely necessary to protect consumers and, provide some clarity for businesses operating in the crypto space.
So it's all about finding that balance, right? Between fostering innovation, but also making sure that things are done responsibly.
Exactly. It's a tough needle to thread.
Okay, well, let's take a step back from Micah for a moment and look at some other interesting news from the crypto world this week.
Sure. What do you have in mind?
Well, one thing that caught my eye was Chainlink's SmartCon event coming up. That usually means there's some pretty big announcements in store.
Yeah, Chainlink, the Oracle network that connects smart contracts to the real world, they're always doing interesting things, especially in the DeFi space.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's Avalanche launching their own Arena token. That seems like a pretty big deal for their ecosystem.
Yeah, it definitely signals some growth and development there. And Stacks, they're undergoing a pretty major upgrade to increase transaction speeds, potentially going to make it a more attractive platform for developers.
Okay, interesting. And what about Terra? I saw something about them going through some pretty significant changes.
Yeah, they're following SEC directives now, so there's some asset burns and even some service closures happening.
Wow, it's amazing how much is happening in the crypto space. Seems like every week there's just a ton of new developments to keep track of.
Yeah, it's definitely a fast-moving space.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to pause for a moment. We've covered a lot of ground already. We'll be right back with more crypto news after a quick break.
Sounds good. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2024-1028, part 2 of 3.
All right, so welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some of the other happenings in the crypto world, specifically Chainlink SmartCon coming up. Yeah, I'm excited to see what they have in store, especially around their cross-chain interoperability protocol, that CCIP. It seems like that could really be a game changer in terms of connecting different blockchains.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, imagine being able to seamlessly move assets and data between Ethereum and Avalanche, for example. No more hoops to jump through.
Yeah, a true Internet of Blockchains kind of vibe. I'm also curious to see what they have cooking in terms of their Oracle network.
Right, because they're already the gold standard for bringing real-world data on chain.
For sure. But there's always room for improvement.
Right, exactly. And with the rise of, things like decentralized AI and machine learning, I wouldn't be surprised if they had some announcements around, new ways to verify data, enhance security, or even integrate AI-powered insights directly into smart contracts.
Oh, wow, that would be interesting. And actually, speaking of AI, there's been a lot of talk lately about the intersection of AI and blockchain. Some people are saying it's like the next frontier.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating area with a ton of potential. We're already starting to see some really cool projects. Things like platforms using AI to optimize DeFi protocols, make predictions about market trends, and even create AI-powered digital art.
That's like the perfect marriage of technologies, right? AI brings the smarts and blockchain brings the trust and transparency.
Right, exactly. And I think we're only just scratching the surface of what's possible there.
For sure. Okay, so moving on, one other interesting piece of news from this past week. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange is launching a virtual asset index series in November.
Oh, yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big step towards bringing crypto more into the mainstream.
Exactly. It's going to make it easier for traditional investors to track the performance of crypto assets.
Right, and potentially get some exposure to the market.
It seems like Hong Kong is really going all in on becoming a crypto hub.
Yeah, they're definitely embracing it and creating a pretty friendly regulatory environment.
Smart move. Other countries might want to take note. Okay, speaking of regulation, can't forget about the ongoing legal battle between Ripple and the SEC.
Yeah, that's been dragging on forever.
It feels like it. Any new updates there?
Well, they recently filed a cross appeal, further solidifying their stance that XRP is not a security.
This case is going to have huge implications for the entire crypto industry, so we'll definitely be watching that closely. Okay, let's switch gears again and talk about something a little different. Bitcoin mining. Specifically, Bhutan's approach to mining Bitcoin using their hydroelectric power.
Ah, yeah. They've got a ton of hydroelectric resources. And they're basically turning that into a digital gold mine.
It's really smart, and it's environmentally sustainable, which is a big plus.
Yeah, for sure. It's a win-win situation for them.
Absolutely. Okay, circling back to Tether for a second. Their CEO, Paolo Arduino, had some interesting things to say about the potential impact of the 2024 U.S. presidential election on crypto regulation.
Right. He seems to think things could change quite a bit depending on who wins.
Yeah, what was his reasoning behind that?
Well, he's been pretty critical of the current regulatory climate in the U.S. He thinks it's really hindering innovation, and he believes that a new administration could be more open to crypto.
It's definitely something to consider. Different administrations have different priorities.
Yeah, and the crypto industry is still so young and evolving so much that the regulatory landscape could shift pretty dramatically.
For sure. Okay, so On a more positive note, FTX, despite all their past challenges, is making some progress recovering assets through settlements.
Yeah, they recently reached an agreement with Bybit to reclaim $175 million. It's a good sign that they're working to make their creditors whole.
It's a reminder that even in the face of really difficult circumstances, there's always hope for recovery.
Absolutely. And there have been some fun and creative partnerships emerging in the crypto space too, like the one between One Eye and CH and the Bruce Lee family for their Take Crypto Seriously DeFi campaign.
Oh, I love that. It's a really good example of how crypto is starting to bridge the gap between traditional industries and pop culture.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of pop culture, we can't ignore Elon Musk. He's been making headlines again with his comments about potential government spending cuts.
Yeah, it seems like he's always got something to say.
Yeah.
But, regardless of whether you agree with his political views or not,
Yeah.
he definitely has a big influence on the public discourse.
He does, and his comments about potential economic shifts are definitely worth paying attention to.
Okay, let's shift gears back to stablecoins for a moment. Anything else interesting happening there besides the whole Tether saga and the MiCA regulations?
Well, there's been growing talk about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, and how they might impact the stablecoin landscape.
Right, those digital versions of fiat currencies issued by central banks. They've been on the radar for a while, but it seems like things are starting to heat up.
Yeah, for sure. Several countries are already piloting their own CBDCs, and others are actively exploring the possibilities. Some experts think they could offer a lot more stability and security compared to existing stablecoins.
Which are often, backed by private companies and subject to market fluctuations.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, will CBDCs complement stablecoins or compete with them?
Only time will tell.
Okay, and one last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up. It's something that's been generating a lot of buzz in the DeFi space. Athena Labs and their ENA token and all the hype around its farming opportunities.
Ah, yes, the ENA phenomenon. Token farming has been around for a while, but they seem to have really struck a chord with their approach.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of speculation around the potential returns, but also the risks.
Right. Some people see it as a really lucrative opportunity, while others are being more cautious.
Which is always a good idea in the DeFi space. Always do your research.
Absolutely. Never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Good advice. Okay, I think we've covered just about everything for this week.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind tour of the crypto world.
As always. But hey, that's crypto for you.
It's never a dull moment. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2024-1028, part 3 of 3. Welcome back, folks, to the final stretch of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from Bitcoin's price moves to the regulatory landscape and even hydroelectric Bitcoin mines.
Yeah, it's been a jam-packed show.
Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, I did want to circle back to Metaplanet for a minute. The Japanese firm that's been on this Bitcoin buying spree, they're really starting to make a name for themselves in the crypto world.
Yeah, they are. Remember earlier when we talked about their focus on BTC yield? Well, they just released their report for October, and the numbers are pretty impressive.
Oh, really? What are you looking at?
They actually saw a pretty significant increase in BTC yield just this past month, which shows that their Bitcoin investments are actually generating positive returns for their shareholders.
So it's working. Their strategy of, combining Bitcoin acquisition with a focus on shareholder value seems to be paying off.
Yeah, it is. And it'll be interesting to see if other companies start following their lead, especially as more and more businesses start exploring ways to incorporate Bitcoin into their treasuries.
It could be the start of a whole new trend. But, it's not just about these big players like Metaplanet. There's also so much innovation happening at the grassroots level with individual investors and developers really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with crypto.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing incredible things happening in areas like DeFi, NFTs, and Web3. It's a constant reminder that this space is full of people who are really passionate about building a more decentralized and transparent future.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to see. And that's what makes it so exciting to follow. It's constantly evolving, and there's always something new to learn. Speaking of new and exciting things, we can't end this deep dive without talking about the potential impact of AI on the crypto landscape. It seems like everyone's talking about the convergence of these two powerful technologies.
Yeah, AI and blockchain, that's definitely the hot topic right now. And for good reason. I mean, there are just so many potential applications, from optimizing DeFi protocols to creating AI-powered digital art and even revolutionizing the way we interact with the metaverse.
It's really mind-blowing to think about all the possibilities. But before we get too carried away with visions of the future, let's maybe take a step back and think about what we've discussed today. What are some of the key takeaways that our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think one of the most important things we've highlighted is the increasing integration of crypto with the mainstream financial world. We're seeing that with Metaplanet's success, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange embracing crypto assets, and even all the discussions around stablecoin regulation and the emergence of CBDCs.
Yeah, it's clear that crypto is no longer just this niche technology. It's becoming a real force in the global economy.
Exactly. And with that mainstream adoption comes greater scrutiny from both regulators and the public. So it's really important for the crypto community to prioritize transparency, security, and responsible innovation.
Couldn't agree more. Transparency and accountability are essential, especially as we saw with, the Tether situation.
Right. And it's also important to remember that the crypto space is still young, that there are going to be bumps in the road, challenges to overcome, and lessons to be learned along the way.
For sure. But, with every obstacle, the community seems to come back stronger and more resilient.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the latest crypto news.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. The future of crypto is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in its evolution.
Well said. Until next time, happy exploring the fascinating world of crypto.